Welcome to chess. I think you're going to enjoy it. This is the starting position of the pieces. In this lesson, we're going to learn how they move one by one, starting with the rook. Ready? The rook looks like a tower. It can move up, down, left or right. In chess, you capture enemy pieces by moving onto them. Now, see if you can capture the stars with your rook. Like the rook, the bishop can traverse the entire board in a single move. However, it exclusively moves on diagonals. Keep going. That's it. Knights jump around in the shape of a capital L. Trek across the board with your knight and capture the star. The knight can also jump over pieces in its way. To capture these stars, you will first have to jump over one of them. Give it a try. The queen can move like a rook or like a bishop, her choice. This mobility makes her the most valuable piece on the board. Now devour these stars with your powerful queen. Keep going. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board. The king is a simple piece to move around. It moves one square at a time, in any direction. Yes. Nice work, Your Majesty. Last but not least, let's learn about the pawn. On its first move, the pawn can move either 1 or 2 squares forward. Try it. From this point, pawns can only move 1 square at a time, and only forward. If the square in front of a pawn is occupied, the pawn is blocked and cannot move. Instead of capturing pieces by moving forwards, pawns capture diagonally. Excellent. Pawns are restricted, but when they reach the end of the board, they can become as powerful as a queen. To finish this lesson, move your pawn forward to promotion and then capture the star. Excellent. Congratulations for taking the first step in learning chess, a complex yet rewarding game. In our next lesson, we'll learn more about how the pieces capture. In our last lesson, we learned that you capture pieces by moving onto them. Capture all the stars and then we'll learn something new. Very good. In chess, you have to be careful about where you put your pieces. Not all squares are safe. See if you can capture my star without allowing me to capture your queen. Well done. These exercises are a good way to practice the basics. This one's tricky, but you're ready. Keep going. Yes. Congratulations. That was a tough one. I've set an obstacle course for you and your steed. Your horse deserves a treat after all that jumping. You will have to be clever to avoid my bishop. Keep going. That's it. Can you navigate this minefield with your rook? Yes. Keep going. Impressive. You're making excellent progress. Can you safely capture the star in this one? That's it. My knight creates a barrier of attacked squares for your bishop to navigate. Do you see a path to the star? Well played. I have another one for you. Sometimes in chess, you must go backwards before proceeding forwards. Can you navigate this knight maze with your bishop to capture the star? Well done. Two bishops can create an impenetrable barrier. Do you see a way through? You got it. Nice job. Bishops can never change what color square they're on, so your bishop cannot capture my queen. This one is hard, but take your time and you will succeed. Your final challenge. Good luck. Well done indeed. This concludes our lesson. You have mastered the basics of capturing. Let's learn the value of the chess pieces. The first thing to know is that not all pieces are equally valuable. The least valuable piece is the pawn. Pawns become more valuable the closer they get to promotion, but especially in their starting position, the pawn is worth the least. Sorry, my little friend. Her bishop is worth about 3 pawns. This is not a rule of chess, but rather a rough guideline based on the experience of centuries of chess masters. A bishop is worth more than a pawn because a pawn can only attack 2 squares, whereas a bishop attacks as many as 13, and the bishop can cross the board in a single move. Her knight is usually worth about 3 pawns as well. I hope you can see why this might be so. Look at all the squares a knight can attack at once. Therefore, in this position, what move should you play? Of course, I'm much worse off without my knight, and your pawn can go on to promote, and my king won't be able to stop it. A rook rates about 5 pawns, and the queen is typically considered the equal to 9. You have 2 captures available. Which is the better one to make? You gain a rook, but you lose a knight. Your net gain of material is 2 pawns worth. Your other capture would have gained more. You have two captures available. Which is the better one to make? Very good. Winning 3 pawns worth of material is better than winning a rook but losing a knight. Final practice. What capture should you make? Indeed, moving the bishop would have exposed your valuable queen to capture. You have learned the first elemental building block of strategy. Well done. Castling is a special move that makes your king safer. You can tap and drag the king to g1, or you can tap the king and then tap the g1 square. When you castle, your king moves 2 squares and your rook swings around to the other side of your king. My turn. When castling, always move the king 2 spaces and the rook will move automatically. Now let's look at queenside castling. This time, move your king to c1. Whether you castle to the king side or the queen side, your king always moves 2 spaces while your rook swings around to the other side of the king. Castling is the only time in chess when you can move 2 pieces at once. Before you can castle, you must first move your pieces out of the way. This is called development. Develop your knight to f3. Good. Now you're ready to castle on the next turn. Now you can castle by moving your king to g1. That's it. At the beginning of your games, you want to develop your pieces and castle quickly. Let's look at another example. Here, it is your bishop that prevents you from castling. Move your bishop to b5. Now both your knight and bishop are developed, so that you can castle kingside on the next turn. Move your king to g1 and castle. That's it. Now let's look at castling on the queenside in more detail. Now your queen is in the way. Gently move her to d2 to prepare to castle queenside. I need to develop my pieces in order to castle as well. Notice how nothing stands between your king and your rook on the queen side of the board. Now move your king to c1 to castle queenside. Now let's look at some examples of when you cannot castle. You cannot castle if your king is in check. Block the check from my bishop by moving your knight to c3. I suppose I should castle. Now you can castle kingside by moving your king to g1. You're learning quickly. Let's look at another example of when you are not allowed to castle. You may not castle with a rook that has already moved, so in this position you may not castle queenside, because your rook has moved to c1. Move your king to g1 to castle kingside. You must be very careful about moving your rooks early because once a rook moves, you cannot castle with that rook for the rest of the game. Next, I will show you how to prevent your opponent from castling. We already know that you cannot castle with a rook if it is moved. The same is true for the king. Check my king by moving your rook to e1. Check. Once my king moves. He will be unable to castle for the rest of the game. The king may not pass through check while castling. Move your bishop to the square h6 to keep my king in the center. Your bishop prevents me from castling by attacking the f8 square. Make your king safe and complete your development by castling. You have a significant advantage because my king is unable to castle. I've taken your bishop in the hopes of finally castling. Capture my bishop with your queen. Again, I cannot castle because of the attack on the f8 square. If I cannot castle soon, your small advantage will snowball into an avalanche of an attack. One way to make the king move is to force him to recapture a piece. Capture my bishop with yours. I must recapture if I don't want to lose material, but once my king moves, he will be unable to castle. My queen prevents you from castling kingside because you cannot move your king into check, of course. Luckily, you can castle in the other direction. Nicely done. Now you're ready for some practice on your own. You can immediately castle, but in which direction? That looks like a good move. I think I will follow suit. Let's look at another example. You can castle in a single turn. Do you see how? If you go that way, I will go this way. Opposite side castling sets the stage for an attacking game. What usually happens is that my pawns end up rushing towards your king's defenses, while your pawns push towards mine. You cannot castle because your king is in check. How can you resolve this? Nice move. Now I'm going to castle. Your turn. Well played. Again, your king is in check. Block the check so that you can castle your king. Nice move. This blocks the check and attacks my bishop. You still cannot castle because you are in check by my bishop. How should you recapture? Nice move. I suppose I should castle now. Your turn. A fine move. My rook prevents you from castling kingside, so your king will have to reside elsewhere. Any ideas? I can only castle queenside since my kingside rook has moved. Your turn. Nicely done. Let's look at another example. You cannot castle kingside because you have already moved that rook. So, what should you do instead? That's it. I was unable to castle kingside because your rook on g1 is attacking the g8 square. My queen prevents you from castling queenside. Your king must seek refuge elsewhere. Indeed. Now that we're both castled, we are in for a closely matched fight. Castle as quickly as possible. That's an excellent square for your knight. I'm ready to castle now. Are you? That's it. You're getting the hang of this. I have one final challenge for you. Do you see how to prevent me from castling? I have no choice but to recapture. And now my king will be unable to castle for the remainder of the game. Do you see how to castle and check my king in a single turn? After stealing my right to castle, you have safeguarded your own king and delivered check at once. Sometimes, you can castle to attack. This is an idea worth remembering. Good work completing this lesson. Develop your pieces and castle quickly in your games to keep your king safe. When you attack the enemy king, that is called check. Check my king by moving your queen to d4. Now my king is in check by your queen. I can, however, move it to safety. In fact, I'm obliged to. My king is no longer under attack, and therefore is no longer in check. Move your queen to d8 to check my king again. Again, my king must move to safety. Now my king is out of check. To win chess, you checkmate my king. That means attacking my king while leaving him no way to get to safety. Move your queen to f8. My king is attacked by your queen, and he has nowhere safe to go. That's checkmate. You win. It's not checkmate if the attack can be blocked. Move your bishop to c3. My king cannot run to g7 since it would still be under attack from your bishop. My only option is to block the check. You can capture my rook on g7 and put my king in check again. I can address the attack on my king by moving to a safe square or capturing your bishop. There are three ways to respond to check: move to safety, block the attacking piece, or capture the piece delivering the check. My bishop is checking your king, but you have many ways to block the check. One good way is to block with your knight. That's it. Now your king is safe. Let's look at another example. My rook is checking your king. What move should you make to get out of check? Well played. Knights are powerful checking pieces. Check my king by moving your knight to f4. The knight's check can never be blocked, and I can't capture your knight, so my king must move. Check my king again on e2 using your knight. Again, I must respond to the knight check by either moving the king or capturing the offending knight. Since the knight moves and attacks by jumping, there is no way to block. I captured your knight, getting my king out of check. Your king can avenge your knight. Your knight fought well. With 2 rooks, you can checkmate by cutting off my king's escape 1 row at a time. Play your rook to b7 to see what I mean. My king is in check. It is not checkmate yet since my king can run to g8 or h8. One of your rooks attacks the 7th rank. Now seal my king's fate by putting your other rook on the 8th rank. What you just did is called the ladder checkmate. If you have 2 rooks, or a rook and a queen, this is a good way to close out the game. Another common checkmate is called the kiss of death. Your queen delivers the fatal peck in person. Move her to b7. Checkmate. My king cannot capture your queen because it is protected by your king. There is no safe square for my king to escape to, nor is there any way for me to block the attack of your queen. It is illegal to put yourself in check. Sometimes the consequences of this rule can be surprising. Capture my pawn on d4 using your queen. My knight would love to capture your queen. However, that would put my own king in check. So my knight can't move, and you got my pawn for free. Exposing one's own king to check is illegal. Let's see another application of this principle. Move your knight to g6. Believe it or not, this is checkmate. My pawn on h7 cannot capture your knight, because that would expose my king to check from your rook, and my king cannot escape to g8 because of your bishop. Can you find a safe square to check my king? You found it. My king is now in check and your rook is not in danger of capture. Can you find a move that safely checks my king? That's it. My king is now in check and I cannot capture your knight. Do you see a move that safely checks my king here? Good. This is a safe square for your bishop to check my king. Can you find a safe square to check my king with your queen? Bravo! This is a safe square which checks my king. Now it is your king that is in check. Do you see the move that escorts him to safety? That's it. Let's try some checkmates. Here, you have a queen while I have nothing but my king. Do you see how to win immediately? Bullseye. Now you have a rook, and again I have nothing but my king. Do you see the checkmate here? Nicely played. You won't often encounter situations like this in a typical game, but it's a good exercise. Do you see the bishop move that is checkmate here? It's nice to see the bishops working together. A pair of pawns doesn't seem like much, but it's enough. Good job. Chess players will say mate in one if they can checkmate in a single move. Can you find the mate in one? Indeed. My king is now checkmated. My rook cannot block this check from your bishop because that would expose my king to your rook's attack. What is the best move in this position? Checkmate. My king has nowhere to run. None of my pieces can block the check, nor can I capture your queen. Two of your pieces are looking at one of my pawns. Why? Checkmate. My king cannot capture your queen because it is protected by the bishop. You can checkmate here, but look carefully before you move. Kudos. My king is checkmated because it does not have a safe square to run to, nor can I capture your knight. There isn't a checkmate here, but a powerful check. Do you see it? That's it. My king is in check, and the only way to stop the check is to block with the queen. Your move. Playing without my queen will be a crippling disadvantage. You're in check. What should you do? That's it. My rook that was checking your king could simply be captured. You are in check. How will you respond? Blocking is often the right move. However, you can do something better than blocking. You are in check. How will you respond? That's an excellent response. Occasionally, we can resolve checks by simply capturing the offending piece. Do you see how to win the game in this position? Is also a check. Do you see how to win the game in this position? Well played. This configuration with the knight and rook is called the Arabian mate. How should you respond to my check? That's it. Here it is best to run with the king. Blocking the check would lose your rook for nothing. All right, let's do one last exercise. This is your final test, and it's a little tricky. Look for the check that wins. Checkmate. The pawn on e7 cannot capture the knight because it would expose the king, which is not allowed. Congratulations on completing this lesson. Using these checkmate patterns in your own games while keeping your king safe will bring you many victories. Let's learn about the trickiest move in the game of chess. En passant. Start by advancing your pawn. Notice how your pawn attacks the d6 square. If my pawn were to move 2 squares at once, skipping over that square, You could then capture my pawn immediately after it passed over the attacked square, d6. Try it. En passant means while passing in French. This move can only be played immediately after the enemy pawn jumps over the attacked square, as if it were captured while passing. Hundreds of years ago, 2 new rules were added to the game. One allowed a pawn that hadn't moved yet to jump 2 squares at once, like this. This created a problem. Your pawn on g5 never had a chance to capture my pawn. In this position, that would allow me to win the game. En passant was adopted as a correction to this injustice. Take my pawn. Let's look at another example. Start by moving your pawn to f6 to attack my g7 pawn. Your pawn on h5 is attacking the g6 square, so I'm going to try to pass over that square. By employing en passant, you can capture my pawn immediately after it jumps over the g6 square. This special move can only be played immediately after the pawn has skipped over the attacked square. Let's look at this position with many more pieces on the board. I move my rook to prepare pushing my pawn from b7 to b5. Push your pawn to a5 to anticipate this. Your pawn attacks the b6 square. If I continue with my plan, de wall. You can capture en passant. Exactly. Let's practice en passant. In this position, we have the same number of pawns. What if I advance my pawn from f7 to f5? There are 2 ways to capture this pawn. Which capture is en passant? Excellent. You're getting the hang of this tricky move. We both have a single pawn, but your king is more active than mine. Your move. My pawn cannot be defended, so I may as well advance it. My pawn jumped past yours, leaping over the square that was attacked. Any ideas? Bravo! You captured my pawn en passant. My king is about to capture your pawn on d5. How can you prevent this? Nice move. If I capture, you will have a passed pawn. What if I advance my pawn forward 2 squares? Your move. You spotted the en passant capture. Nicely done. What about this position? If I advance my pawn from c7 to c5, you have 2 ways to capture the pawn on c5. How could you capture it en passant? Nicely done. Now let's look at some challenging examples. It's my turn. Perhaps I will attack your queen with my pawn. Your move. You captured en passant and now my pieces are forked. Well played. My move. What if I check your king? Your king is in check. Will you move him to safety? You captured en passant. Nice job spotting this idea. For your final challenge, let's see if you can escape this pawn fork. My pawn attacks your knight and bishop at once. It seems like you'll be losing a piece no matter what, doesn't it? Your move. Well done. You solved the problem of the pawn fork and shattered my pawn structure. Nice work completing this lesson. En passant is a tricky move, but now you've mastered it.